The void at the edge of the Karash system held nothing. According to every sensor aboard the Sithari picket ship Threnody of Spears, the patch of space 300 kilometers off the starboard bow was empty, and that was the problem. Pilot Officer Surith tapped his console. Empty space should produce a reading, background radiation, stellar wind, the faint hum of distant gravitic tides. This patch returned nothing at all. Absence shaped like absence. "Run diagnostics," Captain Vorel ordered from the command perch, his long limbs curled around the brass rails. The Sithari were a graceful species, tall and reed-thin, and Vorel wore his command shawl like a man who expected to retire decorated. "If our sensors are failing, we will be the laughter of the fleet." "Diagnostics nominal, Captain. The instruments are working, space itself is." Surith searched for the word. "Wrong." The Threnody of Spears was a picket, a fast scout lightly armed meant for observation. The Karash system was contested space, currently under Sithari Dominion claim despite 3 lesser polities filing protests. One of those protests had come from Earth. The Dominion had filed it under nuisance and forgotten it. Humans were a young species, barely 2 centuries spacefaring by Dominion reckoning. Their navy was a curiosity, their diplomats earnest, their warnings unworthy of council time. "Sir," Surith said, "the absence is growing." Vorel rose from his perch and crossed the narrow bridge. He looked at the screen. The patch of unread space had widened to nearly a kilometer across, then 2, then 4. "What is it?" Vorel demanded. "I do not know." "Hail it." "Hail what, Captain?" Vorel's mandibles clicked, a Sithari expression of unease he did not bother to suppress. "Hail the absence." Surith opened a broadband channel. Standard greetings in 3 trade tongues. The absence offered no reply. It only kept growing, a hole in the fabric of measurable reality, drifting closer with the patient inevitability of a tide coming in. At 8 kilometers across, the absence shimmered. The Sithari bridge crew watched, transfixed, as the empty space began to refuse to be empty. Sensors that had reported nothing now reported too much: mass, energy, structural lattice, drive signatures, weapons emissions, all flooding in at once, as if a curtain had been pulled aside on a stage that had never been empty at all. "Captain," Surith whispered, "mass reading is, it is." "Speak it." 8 million tons, configured for warfare. Vorel's mandibles locked. 8 million tons was not a frigate. It was not a cruiser. It was a capital ship of a class the Dominion's own shipyards struggled to assemble. The shimmer firmed into hull, long, dark, built in flat planes and harsh angles, painted in matte gray that drank the light of the distant primary. Along its flank, white characters in a script the Sithari had been taught to dismiss as a backwater scribble. "Ardent Vow." Beneath that in smaller script, Terran Unified Navy. The Threnody of Spears had been built for observation, but it carried a standard weapons load. Surith's hand hovered over the alert. Vorel did not speak the order. He did not yet know what kind of order was needed. The Dominion picket's communications array chirped. "Incoming transmission, voice only." The voice that filled the bridge was steady. Human, male, spoken in Sithari trade tongue with no accent at all, which was its own form of warning. "Sithari vessel Threnody of Spears, this is Captain Adrian Thorne of the Terran dreadnought Ardent Vow. The Karash system is under disputed claim. Your continued military presence here is unlawful. You will withdraw your forces from this system within 1 standard hour. After that hour, I will begin removing them." Silence on the bridge. Surith turned to look at his captain. Vorel had not moved. "Acknowledge the transmission," Thorne's voice said. "I require confirmation that you have heard me." Vorel found his voice. "Earth ship," he said. "You are alone, you are far from your borders, you are speaking of war." "I am speaking of consequences," Captain Thorne said. "There is a difference." The channel closed. Vorel stood for a long while, looking at the dark wall of the human dreadnought filling his viewport. Then he gave the order to call the fleet. Part 2, The Hour That Ran Out. The hour began. The Sithari fleet did not yet exist in the Karash system, not in force. The Dominion had stationed 3 frigate squadrons and a cruiser flotilla 2 jumps away under the assumption that nothing would happen here that demanded more than a picket and a flag. The flag had been planted. The picket had been posted. Empire was supposed to be about confidence. Captain Vorel sent the emergency burst. Fleet Command would receive it in 40 minutes. Reinforcements could not arrive in less than 4 hours. The Threnody of Spears was a picket alone with a dreadnought, and the dreadnought had set a clock. "Captain," said his weapons officer, a young Sithari, freshly commissioned, her crest still bright with the dyes of her academy. "Your orders." Vorel did not look away from the gray hull filling his forward port. "We hold position. We do not provoke. The Earth ship is bluffing." "Sir," she said carefully, "the mass reading." "I see the mass reading. 8 million tons. The Devourer-class flagships of our own line are 6. Vorel turned. "Then we have learned something useful for the report. Hold position." The hour passed. The clock did not. The galaxy had learned, over 3 centuries of cataloging the species of the local arm, certain truths about humans. Humans were short-lived. Humans were emotional. Humans were divided into many feuding polities and could rarely agree on anything. Humans had only recently mastered fold drives. Humans built ships, yes, but the ships were small, their weapons modest, their armor thin. The Sithari Dominion had observed them politely and dismissed them firmly. The Sithari Dominion had never seen the dark side of an entire civilization that had been listening to the polite dismissal and writing it down. In the final minute of the hour, Captain Vorel ordered weapons to stand by. He did not order them to fire. He was not a fool. He had served 30 years in the Dominion fleet and had seen too many empires fall to know that the loud chest beating of small ships in the face of unknowns was the briefest of careers. He waited. The hour expired. The Ardent Vows broadband opened. Captain Thorne's voice returned, the same steady tone. "The hour has passed. I see your forces have not withdrawn. I will now begin removing them. Sithari vessel Threnody of Spears, you are an observer. Your withdrawal at this moment will be honored. Confirm." Vorel did not hesitate. "Confirmed, Captain Thorne. Threnody of Spears is withdrawing." "Acknowledged, safe transit." The picket turned and ran. Sureth was screaming the engine to full burn before the order had fully left Vorel's mouth. The bridge crew watched their rear sensors with the unblinking focus of those who understood that survival now depended on distance. They had been clear of the system for 18 minutes when the first Sithari cruiser flotilla arrived. It arrived in formation. 6 warships under the command of Flotilla Captain Veshanthi, an officer of the old school who had received Vorel's burst transmission and decided that the proper response was not caution but immediate force projection. Veshanthi had read the report of an Earthship in Dominion space and had laughed. He brought his flotilla into Karash at battle stations, with weapons charged, and he opened a channel to the human dreadnought before he even cleared his exit signature. "Earth Captain," Veshanthi announced. "I am Flotilla Captain Veshanthi of the Dominion Fleet. You are intruders in sovereign space. Lower your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or you will be destroyed." There was a pause on the channel. Then Captain Thorne's voice returned, steady as ever, with the addition now of something else. The dry edge of a man who had heard many threats over a long career and had grown tired of the script. "Flotilla Captain, you have entered the system at battle stations. I will treat that as your answer. The Ardent Vow is now releasing weapons hold." Veshanthi began to laugh. He was still laughing when the first kinetic strike crossed the distance between the ships in less time than his sensors could register the launch, punched through his flagship's forward shielding as if the shielding were a courtesy, and erased his command bridge from the universe. The laughter ended mid-breath. Across the Karash system, war had begun. Part 3, 12 seconds. The Ardent Vow did not look like a ship designed for theater. It looked like a ship designed for work. Its hull was flat where it could be flat, angled where it had to be angled. And its weapons batteries did not project the sweeping curves favored by Sithari's shipwrights. Earth had designed her for a single purpose: to fight a war the galaxy did not yet know existed. In the seconds after the Veshanthi flotilla flagship lost its bridge, the surviving 5 cruisers reacted with the trained discipline of veteran crews. They spread to disperse targeting solutions. They opened plasma batteries at maximum range. They launched torpedo swarms in coordinated waves. The Dominion fleet doctrine had been refined over 4 centuries of conflict against rivals of similar tonnage and similar tools. The doctrine assumed a fair fight. The fight was not fair. Plasma washed across the ardent Vow's flank in 3 coordinated lances. The hull drank the energy. The armor was a layered composite developed in laboratories Earth had refused to publish papers on: reactive, adaptive, designed to channel incoming heat into capacitor reserves that fed the kinetic launchers. The ardent Vow used the plasma to charge her guns. Captain Thorne stood in the center of his command deck, hands clasped behind his back, watching the engagement plot as it updated. His first officer, Commander Iris Halloran, called the firing solutions in a voice trained to remove every emotion from every syllable. Targets 2 and 3, kinetic solution locked. Launch authority requested. Granted. The Ardent Vow's launchers were not guns in the traditional sense. They were rails. They accelerated tungsten cord slugs to a meaningful fraction of light speed and released them. The slugs did not need warheads. The slugs were warheads. A pellet the size of a clenched fist, moving at that velocity, carried the energy of a small fusion weapon and required no detonation to deliver it. Cruiser 2 ceased to exist between one heartbeat and the next. The slug entered her port flank and left through her starboard, and everything in between was no longer arranged in the configuration of a ship. Cruiser 3's commanding officer made the correct decision in the wrong moment. He ordered evasive maneuvers. He had been trained to dodge plasma. He had not been trained to dodge things he could not see coming. The second slug punched her engineering deck. The third went through her bridge. The fourth was unnecessary but had already been launched, and so it took her amidships and ended the question. In 12 seconds, 3 Sithari cruisers were debris. The remaining 2 broke. They turned and ran for the system's edge. Thorne let them go. Commander Halloran glanced at him. "Sir." "Let them carry the report," Thorne said. "We want it spreading." "Understood." Across the system, the Dominion frigate squadrons, now arriving from their forward base in the wake of Veshantha's distress call, stopped their advance. Their commanders had been listening on open channels. They had heard the laughter end. They had seen the debris field on their sensors. They held position and called Fleet Command for further orders, and Fleet Command did not answer for 46 minutes because Fleet Command was, by that point, in an emergency session. The Ardent Vow held her position in the Karash system. Her hull cooled. Her capacitors recharged. Her crew, 2,000 strong, moved through their stations with the discipline of people who had trained for this engagement and were aware, with quiet pride, that they had not yet been required to use any of the harder tools available to them. In the command deck, Thorne turned to Commander Halloran. "Status of the cloak." "Stable, sir. Ready to redeploy on order." "Hold us decloaked. The galaxy needs to see the ship that did this." Halloran nodded, and the others. "They wait. They've been waiting for years. A little longer won't hurt them." In the Sithari capital, 3 star systems away, a senior intelligence officer was being shown a captured visual of the Ardent Vow's hull markings. He stared at the white letters. Terran Unified Navy. He had read every report the Dominion had ever filed on the human polity. None of them had mentioned a navy of this scale. None of them had mentioned a navy at all in the operational sense. He picked up his secure line. "Get me the council," he said. "Get me the council now." Part 4, the warning finally heard. The council of the local arm convened in emergency session within the hour. It had been convened in emergency session 3 times in its 4-century history. once for the Voraxian plague, once for the collapse of the Drelftha trade routes, and now, for the third time, because of a single ship that should not have existed. The chamber was a wide amphitheater of pale stone, ringed by the delegations of the 11 recognized member polities. The Sithari Dominion occupied the largest gallery, as befit the dominant naval power of the region. Earth's delegation occupied a small gallery at the rear, the one traditionally reserved for observer states with no voting rights, no permanent committee assignments, and no business interrupting their betters. Earth's delegation seat had been empty for the last 4 sessions. The Galactic Council had taken note. The Galactic Council had filed it as evidence of human disengagement. Today, the seat was filled. Ambassador Yenthai, a delegate of the small Drelftha Confederation, last surviving senior diplomat of the trade route generation, rose from his bench as soon as the session was gavelled open. Yenthai was old. His scales had paled to the soft cream of his species' elders, and he walked with a cane carved from coral. He had been speaking warnings about humanity for 30 years. The council had grown to tolerate him as a curiosity. "Honored colleagues," Yenthai began, his voice carried in the chamber because the chamber had been built to carry voices. "I have before this body on 23 separate occasions raised concerns about our collective assessment of the Terran polity. On 23 occasions, I have been received with patience and dismissed with politeness. I will not waste the chamber's time today reciting those concerns. They are in the record. I ask only that the record be opened, and that the chamber consider whether the events in Karash require us to revisit them." The Sithari delegation chief, High Speaker Thravanis, rose without waiting for recognition. "The events in Karash are an act of war by a rogue Earth captain operating in violation of every treaty of this body. We are not here to revisit our assessments. We are here to authorize a response." "Speaker Thravanis," Yenthai said, "before you authorize the response, I would ask you to consider what response is possible." The chamber stirred. Thravanis's mandibles clicked. "What is that meant to imply?" "It is meant to imply," Yenthai said, "that the Terran polity has been preparing for this day for a length of time that exceeds the lifespans of most of the delegates in this room. I would advise the chamber to listen before it acts." He sat down. In the rear gallery, the human ambassador rose. Her name was Myra Voss. She was a small woman by human reckoning, with iron-gray hair cut blunt at her shoulders, and she wore a dark suit that bore no markings of rank. She had served in the Earth Diplomatic Corps for 31 years. The council had met her exactly 4 times. They had not retained her name. "I would like to address the chamber," she said. "You are an observer," Thravanis snapped. "You have no speaking privileges in an emergency session." "Speaker Thravanis," Voss said, "you may make that ruling. I would only point out, in the interest of accurate record-keeping, that the Ardent Vow is one of 100 ships of her class currently deployed throughout this council's territory. The others are not in Karash. The others are in your supply depots. The others are at the staging yards of Threv Prime. The others are above the homeworlds of every delegation represented in this room." The chamber went still in a way that no rhetoric had achieved in 4 centuries. Voss waited a measured moment. "They are not yet decloaked," she said. "Captain Thorne is the only one of his peers with current orders to be visible. Whether the others remain in concealment is a question the council will answer in the next 10 minutes. She sat down. Thravanis stared at the human ambassador. Then he looked at Yenthai. Then he looked at the human delegation seat with the recognition of a man seeing a room he had walked past for years. Behind him, his communications aide leaned in and whispered. The intelligence officer's report had arrived. Thravanis read it. His mandibles did not click. They stilled. Part 5, Decloak Order. The council session did not so much continue as collapse. For 10 minutes, no delegation spoke with confidence. The Sithari aide's report passed from hand to hand. Other intelligence chiefs were summoned from their offices and brought into the chamber. Their reports overlapped. Their reports confirmed each other. Across Dominion-controlled space, anomalous mass readings had appeared in the orbital approaches of 14 major systems within the last 6 hours. Local commanders had filed the readings as sensor faults. The faults had not cleared. Ambassador Voss watched in silence. Yinthai watched her. Threvani stared at his slate. Grand Admiral Vectassel was not in the chamber. He was 3 star systems away, aboard his flagship, the Pride of Threv, and he had been monitoring the council session by encrypted relay. The Pride of Threv was a fortress, 2 kilometers from prow to engine bell, 22 main batteries, a crew of 9,000. Vectassel had earned his command in the Sithari purges of the outer reaches, and he had not lost an engagement in 26 standard years. He listened to Ambassador Voss's statement a second time, played from the council relay. He listened to the report from intelligence. He listened to the recordings of Captain Thorne's transmissions. Then he keyed his command channel. All Dominion battle groups, he said. Full mobilization. Target Karash system. Target the Earth Dreadnought Ardent Vow. We will be in jump range within 4 hours. There will be no negotiations. There will be no acceptance of surrender from the Earth vessel or her crew. Vectassel out. Across 43 star systems, the Sithari Dominion fleet woke from peace. In Karash, the Ardent Vow's sensors registered the movements within minutes. Long-range arrays designed for exactly this scenario tracked drive signatures across light years. Commander Halloran brought the data to Captain Thorne. 62 capital ships and counting, sir. Multiple battle groups converging. Estimated time to system entry, 3 hours 40 minutes. Thorne nodded. He had expected this. The decloaking of the Ardent Vow had been a calculated provocation, a stone dropped in a pond to see how high the water would rise. The water had risen as high as Earth had hoped it would. Open the encrypted relay to High Command. Channel open, sir. Thorne lifted his eyes to the small black lens of the relay camera. This is Captain Adrian Thorne, Ardent Vow. The Dominion has committed to full mobilization. I am formally requesting the decloak order across all sister vessels. The window is now. There was a brief pause as the message traveled the long, secure path back to Earth. The reply came in the form of a recorded voice, Fleet Admiral Ivan Pereira, whose career had been spent building the very moment now unfolding. Captain Thorne, the decloak order is confirmed. All ships of the Vow class are released to operational mode. Stand to your duties. Earth stands with you. The channel closed. Across the Dominion's empire, in orbits above 14 major systems and the staging yards of 6 fleet bases, the universe shifted. Ships materialized. They did not appear all at once. They appeared in a pattern, a deliberate, choreographed cascade, calibrated to be seen, calibrated to terrify. Above the Sithari homeworld of Threv Prime, the Earth Dreadnought Persistence decloaked at high orbital station, her gun ports already open. Above the Dominion's primary fleet base at Vesh, the Dreadnought Iron Argument decloaked between 2 anchored battle cruisers, her shadow falling across the bases below. Above Vectassel's personal estate world, the Dreadnought Patience rewarded decloaked at 500 kilometers and held position. Civilian populations across the Dominion looked up at their skis and saw gray dreadnoughts where there had been empty heavens. The panic was as planned. In the council chamber, Threvani's received the reports in real time. He read them. He set his slate down with the careful movements of a man whose hands had begun to shake. He looked across the chamber at Ambassador Voss. "What do you want?" he asked. The arrogance had gone from his voice. What remained was the simple practical question of a man trying to save what could be saved. Voss stood again. "We want," she said, "to be seen." Part 6, The Reckoning in Open Sky. The battles did not begin where the council expected them to begin. Grand Admiral Vectassel had ordered his fleet to converge on Karash. He had assumed Karash was where the engagement would be fought. He had assumed wrong. While his battle groups burned toward the contested system at maximum sustainable acceleration, The Earth dreadnoughts above his fleet bases acted. They had not been positioned for show. They had been positioned for work. Above Vesh, the Iron Argument opened her batteries on the anchored Sithari capital ships. Anchored vessels with cold drives and empty magazines did not respond well to kinetic strikes. The Vesh fleet base lost 40% of its tonnage in the first 9 minutes. Above Threv Prime, the Persistence did not fire on the homeworld. Earth had been clear with her captains on the matter of civilian centers, but she did fire on the orbital defense platforms ringing the planet. The platforms had been built to repel invasions of an earlier era and had not been refitted in 8 decades. They came apart in clean breaks. Across 14 systems, the pattern repeated. Earth ships, decloaked in positions chosen years in advance, hit military targets that had been cataloged in detail by long-running infiltration programs no Dominion counterintelligence agency had detected. The Dominion's mobilization order had drawn the warships out of their bases and sent them toward Karash. Earth was now methodically destroying what had been left behind. In the council chamber, Ambassador Voss watched the reports come in. She did not gloat. She did not speak. She had said what she had come to say. Yenthai sat beside her at the rear gallery. He had moved there in the chaos, and no one had stopped him. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "I had hoped to be wrong." "I know," Voss said. "I read your transcripts. They were generous to us, more generous than we deserved." "You deserved warning," Yenthai said. "The galaxy denied it to you." "The galaxy is being given the warning now." 3 star systems out from Karash, Grand Admiral Vectassel received the news of his fleet bases. He did not break formation. He did not turn around. To turn around now would be to abandon Karash to the ardent vow and to confirm, in the eyes of the Council, that the Dominion had been broken in a single afternoon. He continued toward Karash. He chose to bet his career on a single engagement. He arrived in the system with 62 capital ships. The ardent vow was waiting. She was not alone. While the Dominion battle groups had burned toward Karash, 3 additional Earth dreadnoughts had decloaked at the system's outer edges. They had been there the entire time. The Karash engagement had been the bait. The Dominion fleet had taken it. Vectassel's tactical officer reported the new contacts. The Grand Admiral's mandibles did not click. He had passed beyond such gestures. "Form battle line," he said. "Engage the central dreadnought. We end this with our weight." The Sithari capital ships were not weak. Their plasma weapons were among the most refined in the local arm. Their armor was thick. Their crews were experienced. In any equitable contest, 62 against 4 would have been a near-certain victory. The contest was not equitable. Earth had designed her ships in private, in shipyards hidden inside hollowed asteroids and behind the bulk of gas giants, under the cover of 3 centuries of being underestimated. She had built her weapons to a specification the galaxy had never been allowed to read. She had trained her crews against simulations of the very fleets now bearing down on her. Captain Thorne opened the fleet channel. "All Val-class vessels, standard pattern, discipline, and patience. Earth is watching." The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, Vectassel's flagship Pride of Threv was a drifting wreck, her bridge intact only because Earth wanted prisoners. Of the 62 Dominion capital ships that had entered Karash, 11 survived to surrender. The remainder were debris. In the council chamber, the reports arrived in real time. Threvani sat in his high gallery and read them in silence. He did not look up. He did not speak. Beside him, his aide whispered the count of the dead. Threvani's closed his eyes. "Open the channel," he said. "Open the channel to the human ambassador. Open every channel. We will speak to Earth." Part 7. The bill settled. The terms were drafted in 3 days. The Galactic Council, which had spent 4 centuries refining the procedures by which it conducted its business, found itself revising its rules of order in real time to accommodate the presence of a delegation that had, the day before, been classified as an observer. Earth's gallery was relocated from the rear of the chamber to the third tier. Earth's voting privileges were granted on a unanimous voice motion that took less than 5 minutes to pass. The 4 delegations that had, in past decades, blocked every Earth motion brought to the floor did not speak during the vote. Ambassador Myra Voss accepted the elevation without ceremony. Captain Adrian Thorne addressed the council on the 4th day after the engagement. He came in person. He wore his uniform, dark and unadorned save for the small silver pin of his command. He stood in the well of the chamber and spoke for 31 minutes. He did not gloat. He did not threaten. He spoke of 3 centuries of dismissal. He spoke of the deliberate quiet of a species that had decided, after watching the council operate, that the only way to ensure survival was to prepare in concealment and to be ready when concealment was no longer enough. He spoke of the cost. The 11,000 Sithari sailors who had died in the Karash engagement and across the system raids. The civilians who had not died by Earth's choice, but whose lives had been altered by the gray dreadnoughts now in their skis. He spoke of how Earth would not seek empire. Earth would seek recognition. "We will not occupy your worlds," he said. "We will not garrison your stations. We will withdraw our ships from your orbits within 90 days, conditional on the Council's acceptance of 3 terms. He listed the terms. First, Earth would be recognized as a full member of the Council, with voting privileges and committee assignments at the senior tier. Second, the Sithari Dominion would dissolve its claim on the Karash system and on 6 other contested systems where Earth held competing protests. The systems would be administered by a neutral commission until proper plebiscites could be conducted. Third, the Council would establish a permanent body with Earth's participation to ensure that no member polity could again build naval power in secret. The body would have inspection authority. The body would have Earth on its founding commission. He paused. He looked around the chamber. He met the eyes of Speaker Thravanis, who had not slept in 3 days. "These terms are not negotiable," Thorne said. "They are also not punitive. We could ask for more. Earth has chosen not to. We do not desire the burden of empire. We desire the certainty of being seen. The galaxy has its answer. We will accept yours within 24 hours. The Council accepted within 12. Grand Admiral Vectassel was returned to Sithari space under flag of truce 2 weeks later. He had been treated with the formality due his rank. He had been allowed to write to his family during his captivity. When he stepped off the human transport onto the dock at Threv Prime, he was met by no honor guard. The Dominion had not yet decided what to do with him. He walked into the dock administrative office alone, sat down, and began to write his resignation. Ambassador Yenthai died of natural causes 6 months after the Karash engagement. He had been 93 Drelfth years old. His final speech to the Council, given 2 weeks before his death, was a request that the Chamber preserve, in its permanent record, the transcripts of every warning he had filed about humanity during his career. The Chamber voted to do so. The transcripts now form the opening text of the Council's standing curriculum on the consequences of dismissive diplomacy. Captain Thorne returned to his ship. The Ardent Vow did not stay in the Karash system. She rotated home for refit. Her sister vessels withdrew from Dominion space within the promised 90 days, each one slipping back into the dark from which she had emerged, each one carrying her crew home to families who had been told, in vague terms over a long span of years, that what their parents and partners and children did was important, and that one day the galaxy would learn its importance. The galaxy had learned. On a small green hill outside the city of Geneva, 3 years later, a girl of 9 stood with her grandfather and watched a transport ship rise from the spaceport at the foot of the valley. The transport was a civilian craft. It bore the markings of a passenger line. It carried tourists, traders, and students bound for half a dozen worlds across what had once been Dominion territory and was now neutral common space. The girl pointed. "Where is that one going, Grandpa?" The old man, who had served on the Ardent Vow as a young engineer, who had been on her command deck the day she decloaked in Karash, watched the transport climb into the blue. Anywhere it wants to, he said. The girl smiled and lifted her face to the sky. Above her, in the high reach of the atmosphere, the daylight was bright and clear and full of the long roads humanity had earned. The galaxy had paid the price of ignorance. The bill at last was settled. The end.